loud. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good whatever, everyone. This is the Antrea community meeting, and today is, while staying at home, it becomes difficult to remember which day it is. It's March 25th. Okay, so we'll wait for a few more people to join, and then we'll start the meeting. Okay, I think that we can get ready to start. While we wait for a few more other people to join, I would just want to confirm with you about the agenda for today. I don't think that we have any specific topic to bring up in today's meeting. If not, please let me know.
I think we should go ahead and start planning, obviously, the next iteration. So that needs to be a primary topic.
I agree. Indeed,
I
you know.
I actually sent an email a couple of days ago about things I'd like to talk about.
Okay, and sorry, was that on the mailing list?
Yeah, that was on the mailing list. Yeah.
Okay, so let me see why I have not received it then. I hope that I'm still subscribed. Let me see. Was it like a couple of days ago? Because I did not notice this email at all.
Yeah, it was. Let me check online.
Did you see it? Send it to Project Antrea Dev or the other one, the main Project Antrea?
I thought I did both, but maybe I
you
only
sent it
did
to
one.
Dev. I have it.
Okay.
I sent it to both Dev and Project Antrea. Maybe it's going to spam.
No, yes, no. I don't know what happened to my mail client, honestly. But no, yes, I can read it now. So yes, I had actually, my idea for today was actually pretty much in line with both of you. I wanted first to annoy you with the release planning, so we do this very exciting task first, and then multi-architecture support was the other thing that I wanted to discuss about as well. And this other thing about differential data log, I have no idea what it is about. Maybe then Antonin can explain. Okay, so I think that we can get started. So let's start with release planning. Before going to 0.6, maybe a quick pass on some issues that are still open on 0.5, which I believe we cannot possibly address because the release is today. So regarding Prometheus, Kobe, can you give us a quick update? I know that you have sorted out the Git history in your PR. So do you just need reviews now, or is there some work in progress still?
I did get some reviews, and I think I addressed all of them. I would be happy to get more, obviously, but like for as of now, everything that was open is kind of addressed. Also,
All right.
there are some issues with the testing, so the tests do not pass with this PR.
Mhm. Okay, so let's move this one to 0.6. Just there it is. I didn't see this one. So this one goes to 0.60. And so the other comment that I left on your PR is that we also maybe since now we've moved it to 0.60 and the work is almost done, we probably need to think about also integrating and running Antrea with Prometheus in our CI, so that we don't get caught by the surprise if something breaks. Do you think that this could be doable, or do you see that any major problem in doing that?
I don't see any reason not to do that, although as soon as we have some test running, which actually verify that Prometheus does anything, it kind of would make sense to run them. Otherwise, okay, we have it on, but what difference would it make?
Okay,
Like,
I understand.
so you just want to verify that we don't break in it?
No. I mean, I was assuming that even if we have some trivial metrics, we have some metrics, even if trivial, just to verify that the agents are running and the collection works fine.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, even if the metric has to be as simple as I don't know, the uptime for the agent. Anyway, so that is about Prometheus. And Antonin, regarding this issue 181 about deleting and doing a complete cleanup, do you think we can do a force push and still make it in 0.5, or should we move it out?
No, I didn't have as much time to work as this
Okay.
as I wanted, so let's push it out.
Perfect. Okay.
And still a strong demand either, so I'm sure it will be fine.
Okay, and for these other two issues, bumping the Go version on the CI and the publish ant.ctl binaries. I mean, for the former, I think that it doesn't really matter to which version is targeted. This other one, we need to move it out as well, right? The one about the ant.ctl.
No, it's there is an open PR that will be done for this release,
Okay.
And the Go one is. I'm just waiting for the last minute for the NCTL one because of
all right, perfect.
NCTL. And for the Go version, yeah, it's really a trivial change. As you said, it doesn't matter because we ship it as a Docker image anyway. So it's a trivial issue. It's just I was hoping somebody would pick it up as a good first issue, which is why I didn't do it myself.
Okay, so let's move it to 0.6. And then I will just leave the one about the ant.ctl binaries that you're doing like a last minute thing. And we are finished with 0.50, which means we can go to 0.60. And I thought that I already had the tab open for it, but yeah, there it is. So now the payload looks fairly small. And to be honest with you, I would like to keep it fairly small because so far we've been pushing features to milestones, but always pushing them out. And so I think that considering our release cycles, maybe staying with this feature payload is good enough for 0.60, unless you already know of other more important features that need to be added to this release. I don't know, Cody, if you have an opinion here. I think Cody dropped. Yeah, we lost him.
I think at least he probably wants Windows support.
Windows support in 0.60. Giangione, I think you talk more with Wen-Yin and the other people working on it. Do you think it's might be doable?
I can only say from code review, I think most of the change about OS flows and OS port configuration is done.
Mm-hmm.
I think the missing part is still about installation.
Right. And what about the CI pipeline? Is Windows integrated in the CI pipeline already?
Not yet, I guess.
Okay,
we
so
discussed a few ideas with Zhangsheng and Zisheng, but I don't know if they made progress on this.
I think they are working on it, but it's not ready yet.
okay. And April 22 is 4 weeks from now. I will say that, you know, if in 2 weeks time we have at least the CI in place and we are a good stage of in terms of code review, then maybe we can make it. Then installation is probably something that I don't know if we must have it immediately, or maybe we can decide to defer installation to the next release. Oh, code is back.
I think,
Sorry, I lost power here.
Hey, Cody, we were talking about the 060 payload, and there was a mention that Windows might be another desired feature for 060. So we were considering whether it can be made or not realistically. So the feedback that we got, I'm just summarizing what we discussed while you were offline, is that the code is in a fairly good stage of development. So let's say what is missing, however, is the installation part and the integration in the CI pipeline. For the integration in the CI pipeline, work is in progress, but we need to check with Johnson to see where we are. And for the installation part, this is still a to-do. So I was wondering whether we can face the, you know, we can we can sort of divide the shipment of this feature in multiple releases, and maybe we start adding Windows support, but you know, without having installation facilities, which means it could not be considered like beta or whatever. It should be like an alpha. Release. Mm-hmm. An alpha, and then maybe add installation support in 07.
I like that. I like that approach because I do think that there are some additional priorities even before Windows support, right? If we have code that can be tested in alpha, great, we can include it in 0.6. But I think it's imperative that we shift some focus to the SNAP problem and to IPAM and some others. We'll have to talk about IPAM, but SNAT and IPAM and being able to do grouping of precedents for policy. So basically a tiering. Those are the top three that we need to get traction right now from a customer perspective.
Perfect. So do we have already trackers in GitHub for these issues? I think
we don't. So we need to create. We need to create one for the tiering. I don't believe we have a tiering one yet.
Yeah, so, but the SNAT one we do have one, right?
No.
No.
So I think for Windows, at least we will have some simple installation. Otherwise, even for CI, you don't have a way to set up CI testbed.
Yeah. What does it mean making partially adding Windows support in a release without installation support? That means people can't use it concretely. So
right. At least maybe it's not very good, but at least you need a way to install one node by one node.
Yeah, no, that's right. I was thinking that even if we don't provide installation support, we could provide a guide for installing it manually. Maybe it will be like a very painful and hacking your way through installation, but we could provide a sort of a guide to say, okay, if you want to try this feature, that's how it's done. But you know, if we are in a stage where you cannot properly, without any installation support, you can't realistically run it in the CI pipeline, then we are dead, and maybe it's better to just say, let's postpone this to 0.07. Because you're right, John, you're right that for running it in the CI, some sort of installation, even if with random scripts stick together in some way, we must have it.
Yeah. Sure. Let's say, but I assume at least we have some basic installation
Okay.
script or PowerShell or whatever. And then
Okay.
for the HiPath slide, Cody asking, I think it's pretty hard for 0.6 in my mind. We don't even have an idea how to do that. Right? And
No,
it's
I'm not suggesting
simple...
zero. I'm not suggesting 0.6. I'm saying let's don't work on Windows things, or let's gradually introduce Windows, because right now, Windows is not blocking our traction with customers. That's not the call that we're being asked to deliver. I think it's going to be a great differentiator, but if we even need to push Windows back until like 0.9, right, 8 weeks out, that's not going to be a major detractor of the product. Right now, the biggest hurdle that I'm running up into as I talk to the other, especially to, say the TKG team and other folks, we really need to focus on how do we deliver SNAT capabilities, how do we deliver tiering capabilities, and how do we deliver some sort of IPAM capability. And if it's 0.7 or 0.8, that's fine. I just want to target these for a June timeframe on those features.
Sure. How about let's think more on the define the requirements, and then we can think about how could we do that further. And I don't think we should post other ongoing work.
Sure.
It doesn't make any sense.
So for 0.6, what are we still lacking in terms of a stability perspective and being able to package this in a way that is going to be supportable?
I personally feel probably we at least need to support a bundle. And maybe for logging, we should improve a little. For example, now we don't really have our own log directory.
Are there specific open source core pieces to that need to go into place in support of a support bundle?
First, I think we should have a way to connect logs. Now we are just using leveraging the container runtime to maintain the logs. It's not very easy to connect logs in my mind. And then at least we should have API and the CLI to get a log bundle. And then other solution packages can just call this API or CLI to get the bundle.
So does it make a sense in the next release for us to select a logging strategy and when you say relying on the container runtime, does that mean that we don't have like because if we select a logging strategy, say like Fluent or something like that, to ship logs somewhere, right? I don't know that necessarily the log housing is right now part of the core, but can we at least select and decide on a logging strategy and build the appropriate support pieces so that we can go ahead and have a mechanism to obtain logs for a support bundle? I'm trying to figure out like where do I draw the line on that separation there?
Sure. I think there are two things you're describing. One is for the streaming the log. That one probably since we even we are saying we are relying on the container runtime to maintain the log. Maybe we should have some way to stream the log to some syslog server or whatever. Salvatore, maybe you guys should chime in. Maybe you know more about this than me.
I completely agree with you. It is also incredible in some way that even commercial solutions are relying on this approach of just just providing access to container logs. For instance, that's the case for OpenShift. So they just you need the logs, go fetch the container log, and it is extremely annoying for troubleshooting, because if you have a container that keeps restarting, for instance, you only have the log of the last execution. You don't know what happened before, and typically you have no idea why the container is restarting. So it's I think that we need to support some form of streaming. Syslog is the most obvious choice, but I'm old, I'm 40 years old, maybe young people now do it in a different way. I don't think that we want to export logs to commercial solutions that like log collectors, but I'm fairly sure that there is something better that we can do apart from syslog. But whatever I know, from what I remember, tools like Kibana, these kind of things, they all use a syslog exporter. So for your application to use a syslog exporter, and then they import the log, and you can process all the data in it. So starting with syslog is a great start, in my opinion. But if you have a better idea, we can develop it. I remember that we had an old issue that I don't find anymore about using a tool for collecting container log bundles or something like that. I don't remember the name of this tool. Antonin created the issue, I think.
Crash diagnostics.
Yeah, crash diagnostics, right. And is this something that you have already implemented?
No, that's something I looked into a while ago, but it was a very young project at the time, and I don't think they've had a lot of improvements since. It's also a VMware Tanzu project, and
Yeah.
it's very basic. I think the way it works is using some file format, a bit like a Docker file. You describe the operations, your diagnostics operation you want to perform on each node, and then basically they have an orchestrator which is going to SSH into each node and perform those operations for you. So it's kind of like a declarative way of describing exactly what you want to collect on each node in the cluster.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So it's more
actually,
like for live troubleshooting, right? Not like it doesn't allow you to collect logs
It's not
after.
for, it's not
Not
really for the
forensics.
background
Yeah.
task it's going to be running.
Okay.
actually, my question, like, instead of doing something, I mean, in Antrea, I mean, like packaging any log solution into Antrea, do you know any other ways that you can just enable some logs streaming solution in the node? So it can connect Antrea log and other logs, and we don't need really
So
to
basically,
package.
we store the log on the node, and then from the node, the log is forwarded to a third party, basically.
Even for now, we just like, for example, Docker to connect log. Do they have some solution to stream that log somewhere?
I'm pretty sure that there are around, because basically, think about it. You can configure an agent on every node that sends these logs to a syslog exporter, and then you can collect, and then you can analyze them with the commercial or open source tools. So yeah, in theory, this is already possible. The thing is that I noticed. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. Sorry, I'm just one asking. For example, in the OpenShift case, do they have any solution to stream logs over the system service container, or whatever, to some logs?
So not at least in the default installation. In the default installation, what happens is that you have to go on every node and look at the logs on that node. Or if the pod is still running, you access the logs with kubectl logs. But I'm pretty sure that you can configure some logging operator, because for the OpenShift, everything is an operator that will add a solution to push all the logs to to some log analyzer. So we can probably think about having a solution in this direction, and as you say, not implement code in Antrea for explicitly supporting log streaming, like as a client, which I agree is probably the best thing to do.
I honestly think it's best to make it agnostic, as you're saying, right? Like Antrea shouldn't have an opinion about how its logs are collected and analyzed unless we're building additional analysis value on top of that, right? Like if we're building something that is domain specific to Antrea for analyzing the logs, then we may have a reason to say, hey, we need to connect to this particular set of logs that have been collected and perform that analysis. But if it's just about collecting the logs, then we shouldn't have an opinion, but we should be open to support multiple types of log collection, either syslog or Fluent or whatever it needs to be.
That is right. My reasoning was that if we want to have something just for the logs, the syslog exporter is the only thing that we want to have. Then if we look at the shiny new things of the cloud native world, there is all this movement around distributed tracing, what they call observability, which is it's just a new word for something which is as old as bread probably, but that introduced a new series of frameworks like Jaeger, open tracing, and this kind of software that have completely different interfaces. And in that case, we'll need to embed the logic into Antrea. To be honest with you, I believe this is interesting from a value proposition and a community perspective, but at the moment, I don't see any concrete application from Antrea. Yeah, talking about distributed tracing.
Yeah, I don't see a specific need for distributed tracing right now.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of packet tracing, that's a different thing. I think those diagnostic tools would be very useful.
Yes.
But yeah, we're distributed tracing typically from the cloud native perspective is looking at like tracing between microservice requests right at the web layer at the layer 7. That's not going to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
That is right. And yes, instead having packet tracing capabilities is something a lot more useful. But then again, I don't think that we have yet a full architecture here, because it's not really an item that we can put on the 060 release. I think we first need to devise an architecture and then identify work items that can be addressed in in releases.
For tracing, I think Zhan Gu and Wen Ying, they are working on some proposal. Maybe sometime they should present to the community.
Yes, and yeah, to this aim, I mean, this was something that I wanted to mention at the end of the meeting, but we need to think about including also the people in China in the community meetings. It would be great to, start having also meetings with China-friendly time. So that at the end of the day, more than half of the contributors to Antrea are there. So I guess it makes sense to have them in the meeting too. But this is something that we can discuss after the meeting.
I'm going to add one piece to this, though. I do think, even though if we don't include something in core Antrea, I do think we need a contrib type module or whatever that says, as a reference architecture, if I wanted to stand up a very, very simple Fluent collection into, whatever we decide to collect that into, we could use the typical, what's it called? The Fluent and Kibana and help me out here. The log collection piece. I can't think of what Kibana. Yeah, but that was it. Elasticsearch. Thank you. I could not think of the term. The Fluent Elasticsearch and Kibana. Basically, because at some point, like if we want people to start testing this out of the box, even though we don't include it as part of the core, we could say here is a reference architecture. Antrea, is open to, if you want to ship to syslog, if you want to ship to some other enterprise log collector, we don't care. But if you want to try this out from an open source perspective, here is a very, very, very simple log collection, because it's going to be very hard to do demos of some of the features like flow logging and tracing and all of that without some way to visualize that and to show, people here are the logs that we're seeing. Thoughts on basically putting together a contrib package around that?
Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, I agree with your. I completely agree with the point that you're bringing up. But what I don't see at the moment is what should go into this contrib package.
Well, I'll give you an example. What our friends over at Calico do, they actually ship a default Fluent operator, right, and a default, a Kibana Elasticsearch type stack, right? And it's very simple. It's not, anything crazy. We're just looking at raw logs. If you want to add some dashboard, look and feel above it, using Kibana, sure.
I understand.
Knock yourself out. But I think that there's enough. I think this is commoditized enough and has been done enough that we should be able to find something fairly easy without much effort in terms of integrating
that Calico one,
an add-on package.
It's in open source version or commercial version?
Well, they ship that in the commercial version, but I don't think that this is a commercial piece for us. This is an open source piece, right? We should provide logging out of the box.
So basically that would be a package. What you're envisioning here is a package of documentation, configurations that will allow you to bring up a stack that includes Antrea, Kibana, with Elasticsearch, Fluentd, to test, to provide let's say an end-to-end experience if you want.
Yeah, I would say more like an add-on operator, right? Like if I've got an Antrea stack that I've already brought up, right? I spin up this add-on operator, and now that operator spins up the necessary components to establish log collection and give me a UI to peer in at those logs.
I got it.
Something very simple. Like I'm not looking for, again, crazy dashboards or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not more like a code development task if you want. It's more like solution engineering. That would be correct, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So streaming is one thing. Actually, originally when I talk about logging, I'm more talking about should we have a way to connect log bundle? Because at least for VMware support team, they are more like this way to when you run into some customer issue, they always ask for a support bundle from the customer.
So I think that can be part of it, right? Like I think we build into core Antrea the way to collect. So the question, when you say streaming versus static collection, so let's break that down a little bit and help me understand what pieces of the log collection are streaming, what pieces are static, and when a request comes in for a support, what would your expectations as a support engineer be?
Sure.
Like what all do you need to see?
I think typically in our support process, it's like I think typically they want some CLI or API or UI can very easily to get all the logs and other less redundancy. For example, in Antrea case, we are thinking about maybe we can dump the OS flows. That may be too much to include in every support bundle, but just to give you some ideas, they generally want to dump some state of the system and the logs together and get a bundle.
If I could regurgitate to you, you basically want a copy of what the user intended, right? So whatever the configuration the user sent in terms of network policy, potentially Antrea configuration, et cetera. And then you want to see how the Antrea management plane actually interpreted that and applied it on each node, right? So basically, what is the state of the data plane or the state of the OVS tables with the rules, right? It's a snapshot.
It's a full state snapshot plus all the logs that you can think of that can be useful to the purpose. So typically, if you have an appliance, you collect every single log in the appliance, a full state of the appliance, including, for instance, both application state, like, API objects, database state, and even up to operating system state, like a snapshot of PS, snapshot of top, all this kind of information.
Sure. And how far back does it go? I mean, do you set a limit? Do you say, I want a snapshot of the last 5 minutes, the last 10 minutes? Because that's not really a snapshot, right?
Most software allows you to select also like the same thing that you do with journal, right? You can select how far you want to go in the past. Indeed, the problem that we usually have is that there isn't enough log history for analyzing any sort of failure, because usually log rotate faster than what you want.
So again, coming back to how we would separate these concerns, right? In the core open source code, right? We need the facilities that can stream those pieces of information, and syslog is fine.
Right.
To help us on the demo side, we have some facility with an ELK stack. That's what I was looking for. That was the term, ELK stack, or EFK stack, that can capture that. But what we also would, if I want to commercially support this, then we can build our own support bundle that captures that and basically makes that, for the support engineer, they can recall, to any point in time or any snapshot from all of the data that was streamed to it. I think that's separate and apart from what happens on the core side or the open source side, right? Just having the facilities to create the streaming information.
Okay. So my suggestion on this regard is for 060, let's try and flesh out your idea, because I believe that it's not a task that requires any sort of code development in Antrea. Maybe if we need to just the syslog, the ability of streaming to syslog. And let's try and see if we can put together this bunch of configurations that will allow to bring up Antrea plus an ELK stack. And so that if you have to showcase, or we need to build some attractive videos for the community, yeah, we can do that and show that this integration works fairly nicely. The story about the collecting the snapshot of the state, the snapshot of the system, I think that even if crash diagnostic is fairly limited at the moment, I think that it's better to work with using a tool like that rather than writing software from scratch, and perhaps use that crash diagnostic tool to generate this system image collection. Then we can decide what to collect exactly, what is useful information and what is not useful information. I believe that it will be a mix of Antrea and Kubernetes state, and we can decide exactly what needs to go in. And I don't know if we want to target this one as well for 060, because I really would like to focus on bug fixing and stability for this release and not add too many features. I mean, this story about the ELK stack is not really a feature. It's something completely orthogonal.
It's a contrib, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Crash requires,
go ahead.
Crash diagnostics is based on SSH access to all the nodes. So, and I'm hearing in this conversation, I'm hearing stuff about adding capabilities to Antrea to stream information to the outside world. So I mean, these are kind of like orthogonal in a way. I mean, crash diagnostics is more of a model of, I'm going to SSH into the node for you. Just tell me, like in a very simplified declarative way, what you want me to execute on each node. And then I'll return that information to you in a nice packaged way as a tarball. That's different from Antrea having the ability to like expose an HTTP server to the outside world and stream information or answer queries, right?
That is correct. And that is correct. And that's why I think that one doesn't rule out the other. So there is I think there are two equally valid requirements here. One is to add Antrea to some centralized log collector like an ELK stack, and the activity that we are planning here is not like doing anything on that regard. It's more like showcasing that Antrea can do that. The other one is about providing a facility to build a system snapshot that can be used for debugging failures, by third parties, which is useful as well, but it's orthogonal to the other one. I will say that the first feature sounds more to me community oriented, and this latter feature sounds more like commercially oriented, because it's something that will be pretty much useful mostly for technical support people, but it's something that it can be also useful for us, for instance, when we get issues filed from users on GitHub, and we can ask them, hey, can you please upload your system snapshot? And which also means that we have to be careful with it, because if they start uploading files with hundreds of megabytes, I don't think that GitHub will take them. This is my thinking, and I think that we've kind of covered quite a lot about logging, and is there any other thing that we would like to discuss about logging? I guess that I've annoyed a lot of people here with my voice, so now you talk.
No, I think all these have been very valid points. Antonin, in terms of, You know, I think the two concerns that I see is, number one, ensuring that our logs from the streaming side, at least that are going to standard out or whatever the typical logging mechanism, that we've captured all the data there that we need. But then we also have this point in time, right, that if we need to log into every node to capture some other state, the question I have there is that an expensive operation? Is that something that we should just periodically do anyway and output it to kind of the streaming logs, or is that something that we always expect to be a you know, imperative request that comes in that says, hey, I need to capture this state and then send that out? A lot of that, because if it's a static state, it's just kind of duplicative, right, into the logs every time you capture it and stream it out. I'm trying to understand how expensive that operation is, because it may change our approach.
Well, I think the end goal itself is not like very clear to me, because if the end goal here that we're looking into is specifically, I mean, the thing is, we've been discussing two things. If the end goal was to like be able for people reporting opening support issues with the Antrea in the Antrea GitHub, sorry, to submit enough information for us to have, then maybe crash diagnostics is actually the right tool for that, because this is an open source project. In order to submit information, we ask that you do have SSH access into every node. You just run that crash diagnostics script template that we can provide and collects all the information. You upload it somewhere for us to see. I mean, for the community product, maybe that's enough, and maybe that's the right approach, because it's really a low-cost approach, in my opinion. There is actually no changes required on the Antrea side. But if we want to build like an infrastructure that can be extended, then that really doesn't apply.
My security bells go off when I hear the way the crash diagnostic approaches this, right? Like, yeah, it may be okay to have SSH access to all of the nodes, but that is not going to fly, at least for enterprise adoption. And again, I know that there's different targets we're looking at. From a code change perspective, it seems to me that that's why we've developed AntCuddle, right? Is we can put in use that command line tool to put a request in via the API server to have our agents basically collect something. I would prefer that approach, but that requires, you know, obviously code changes there, and it may be too big for 0.6 if that's the case. I think before we run out of time, because we've only got 15 minutes left, why don't we go ahead and look at the bugs that we need to address in 0.6? Let's see how much that fills up 0.6. And then come back to, as Jinjin, you know, already pointed out, we really need a better PRD on this. And let's put the PRD together. And if we have additional bandwidth in 0.6, we can begin, you know, we can begin this capability and extending this capability. But I do think getting to a stable release, especially with needing to begin activities around bundling and packaging, it's imperative that we get some of these bugs knocked out.
All right. So in the interest of time, since in the agenda we also have two other topics proposed by Antonin, I would like to have you, especially Antonin, who proposed this topic, make a call on whether we want to discuss bugs for inclusion in 0.060 or discuss ARM and the other DD-log feature that Antonin was talking about, and then maybe we can review the bugs on Slack and
sure,
if possible. So, shall we do bugs or ARM? Antonin, you have a preference?
How about let's talk about arms?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I agree with
it's
that.
very interesting to me.
Yeah, we can do the bugs. We can do the bugs offline. So
okay, perfect. So maybe we can. I mean, we can. For the bugs, you can either start targeting them to 060, or you can ping us about them in Slack, and we can decide offline. Anyway, so let's talk about ARM. So I've read these. I've read the issue description, and I saw the problems that we have. but it seems now that you have a patch, Antonin, that builds the ARM image, right?
Let me share my screen because I actually have three
Yeah, sure. I'll
slides.
stop sharing mine.
Sorry, I was muted. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, basically somebody opened an issue about, I think they were trying to run Antrea on Raspberry Pi, and so they were asking for either a Docker image that can of Antrea that can work on ARM CPUs, or instructions on how to build Antrea for ARM architectures. So I think for a couple of months now, I mean, the first approach I've looked at is, I think for a couple of months now, Docker um, uh, is supporting like a new build CLI build command, which is called build X, with a different like backend, and that command is able to produce like a what we call a multi-architecture image. It's actually like a Docker manifest list. So basically, it's a collection of architecture-specific Docker images, and so it shows up as one Docker image on your Docker repo, and you can just like start a container from that, and it's going to pick the appropriate image for your architecture. And if you look online, like the Ubuntu image on Docker app, for example, is actually a manifest list because it comes with support for multiple architectures, which is fortunate for us because the Antrea image depends on the Ubuntu image. And so I gave this a try. It was taking a long time to run locally inside my Mac. But I actually tried to integrate it with our CI on GitHub using a GitHub workflow. And it takes about 3 hours to build for those 3 architectures. AMD, which were AMD 64, which is the only architecture we support at the moment. ARM 64 plus ARM v7, which is a 32-bit ARM architecture that I think is the one used on the Raspberry Pi. At least some generation of the Raspberry Pi. So I think 3 hours is like, obviously it's not reasonable enough to run on every pull request, every time a pull request is updated, but that's definitely reasonable to run for every release, and maybe even every time the master branch is updated, because we usually update it on average like 3 or 4 times a day. And also this can be sped up by pre-building the page image, because right now in this GitHub workflow, what it does is it builds the OVS image for all 3 architectures, which takes a long time, and then it builds the Antrea image, which takes a smaller time. And the total of this across all 3 architectures is 3 hours. And I actually published, can I open this link here? I actually published an example image, which I built with that process to my personal Docker hub, and you see the support for all 3 architectures here. Yep, sorry. Oops, keep clicking on the wrong thing, but yeah, hopefully you can see that. And so the big issue now, this was quite easy, and I think we can make it work. But like the big issue is, should we actually be able to test those images before shipping them as part of a release and saying we support those ARM architectures? And like, well, I think the first thing to point out, which is not in this slide, is that actually Kubernetes itself doesn't really test the ARM images it's shipping for the Kubernetes control plane components. So maybe there is a precedent for not testing the image that you're shipping. But like, I'm a little bit worried, especially for the 32-bit ARM architecture, because there was like a compile time issue because of some incorrect assumptions made in the netlink Golang package, which is a package we depend on for the Antrea agent on Linux. And so I'm afraid that we're going to have like similar issues, especially on 32-bit, which may not translate into build errors, but which would like definitely cause like bugs when running as the Antrea agent on ARM CPUs. So what I did as a next step is I tried to run some basic sanity checks in a kind cluster. So the first issue here was that there is no kind node image available for ARM architectures. I was able to build one myself following some instructions I have online using an AWS EC2 instance, which is using an ARM64 CPU. So I mean, it's a VM, but let's call it like a native ARM worker, which enabled me to basically build that image natively pretty quickly, because this is a native ARM64 machine and not something which is emulated, like what I'm currently using to build the Antrea images. So using that image that I built myself, I tried using Travis CI, which offers some ARM-based workers to run the test in a kind cluster. The problem is those workers are themselves containers, so they actually cannot run kind because they have limited privileges, and those privileges, some privileges which are required by kind, are not available in these ARM workers. And Travis CI was the only public CI service which offers native ARM workers. So basically, using public CI, I wasn't able to run tests on the ARM Antrea image that I built. So one possibility to run tests is to actually use the same EC2 ARM-based instance that I've been using to build the kind image for testing, and that would actually be fast and probably pretty good. It'd probably be difficult to set up actually for our CI system, because we would need to create the EC2 instance, install everything, run the test, delete the instance. So there would be some kind of a lot of infrastructure tests, probably infrastructure logic and code to make this happen. And one other issue is that AWS EC2 only supports ARM64. So if we want like ARM v7, the 32-bit architecture, there is no possibility to do it on AWS. And so basically, if we want to do a similar thing, we would have to host our own like a builder, maybe a couple like Raspberry Pis. And I have a Raspberry Pi, so I would be fine doing that. But again, there's a lot of complexity for the CI infrastructure here. So the last thing I tried, and that was kind of like the most promising step here, is just like Docker build X is using like emulation. I think it's using QEMU to build the multi-architecture Docker image, the manifest list. We can use emulation to also run the test. And actually, I spent a couple hours yesterday trying this out. I created like a decent compute optimized EC2 instance. I installed QEMU. I created like a QEMU VM with a couple cores and to emulate an ARM64 system. And the problem is I actually started running into a lot of issues which were not connected to Antrea or kind, but which were actually connected to Kubernetes having issues running on ARM machines, and specifically slow ARM machines. And there have been like a lot of issues reported on Raspberry Pi, especially recently, so I don't know if anything changed. And obviously when you're running emulation, even on some beefy server, you end up with something which is even slower than a Raspberry Pi, especially when you're inside your emulated VM, you're running like multiple Kubernetes nodes using kind. So I think things being very slow and Kubernetes support for ARM not being optimal, I actually started running into a lot of issues. And I didn't put like the link to those GitHub issues here, but actually one of the Kubernetes contributors like pointed me to an issue, pointed me to a Reddit discussion. And it seems that Kubernetes itself has like several issues when running on ARM, which are basically like preventing us from testing Antrea on ARM efficiently at this stage. So hopefully that puts like everyone up to date on what I've been trying to do. And basically I'm trying to get feedback on a few things. One is, do we actually need to support ARM at this stage, or can it be postponed to later? 2, is it good enough to ship images for ARM like Kubernetes is doing without actually testing them? And 3, if we want to test those images, does anyone have some crazy super idea that I've not looked into yet?
So from a priority perspective, I can tell you that ARM is probably not going to be heavy priority till later half of this year.
Okay, I mean, that's still not a super long time frame. Right?
No, but I'm saying it's if I were looking at like things to work on between now and July, I would say ARM is not one of them.
Okay. And
we can reevaluate at that point.
For people running on ARM, do you think they actually run everything on ARM or just the worker nodes? Because if they don't run the control plane nodes on ARM, and if maybe we don't try to test that, maybe, I mean, it's going to be difficult because we wouldn't be able to use kind, but maybe that resolve some of those issues with Kubernetes control plane components not running like very well on ARM CPU.
Great question. When I've seen ARM set up, it's exactly as you've described. The workers are running ARM and the control plane is not necessarily running ARM.
Mm-hmm.
That is also true that, at least for myself, I've never seen an ARM deployment outside of KubeCon. Which means, it's the kind of, hey, I show you Kubernetes running on Raspberry Pi. And what do you do with that? Nothing.
I think we could talk to our friends in the community on the edge telco side to see, where these requirements are going, but I just don't think the requirements are solid enough for us to spend a lot of time on that yet.
It's more, it is we need to see if we have some viable IoT application, and in that case, it could be a good thing to have.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a collaborator come to us and say, hey, I would like to contribute code and I'm going to deploy this to, 10,000 or 50,000 devices, then yeah, that's a viable reason for us to spend some time on this. But I don't have that right now.
Do you think we should put the images out there so that people can run them and we can actually get feedback if there are issues with those images, or let's not even put those images out there until we can actually test them?
I mean, if we treat the thing is that we can explicitly document there is no guarantee that those images will be working, and I think that to not use too many resources on CI on the build system, we can probably build the ARM images once a day on master instead of building them at every commit. And I don't know if this will make a more complex workflow.
No, once a day is fine. I mean, basically my proposal, I think, is because we can only have one, is to use like a different Docker image name or a different Docker image tag for that multi-arch Docker image and put it on our Docker hub and update the README, say that, okay, we have those ARM images. We haven't been able to test them, which is actually exactly what Kubernetes is doing. And they're not testing them for exactly the same reason. It's actually really hard to get CI resources to be able to test on ARM. I mean, ARM64 is not, we could do ARM64. ARM v7 is not realistic, I think, at that stage. So we can just
ARM v7 is what Raspberry Pi runs, right?
Yes, I think even the latest Raspberry Pi is.
No, you're right.
Architecture.
Anyway,
or maybe it's a dumb question. So do we know any other thing I support ARM?
I am fairly sure that Cilium doesn't work on ARM. They don't have this support. I don't know about Calico. Maybe Cody,
Yes, Calico does have support for ARM, but it's a novel thing. I mean, I've never seen a customer ask for it.
All right. And I have to be rude now and tell you that we are already 1 minute over time. I know that for some of you is late. Some of you have to run to other meetings. So I would like to, maybe we can defer to Slack also this conversation about ARM builds It would be nice also to use the channel for more discussion topics, as it will allow more people to contribute. So let's move to Slack for discussing bugs to add 060 payload, and for continuing the ARM discussion. And for the DD log discussion, it's a topic that Anton brought up. Maybe we can either continue discussion on Slack for this, on the mailing list, and for sure there will be a slot for it in the next community meeting. Say that, I would like to thank you everyone for attending, and I am going to stop the recording now. Thanks everyone again.